So, John,
Yeah, Robert.
what's the big indicator for you that Christmas is imminent?
When the decorations come out.
Decorations come out. That makes sense. For me, it's the first snow of the year, and actually, we're recording on the day that the first snow of our season this year.
Yeah, this year, first snowfall.
So it seems only fitting that we shift from a Beyond Saturday Morning episode and talk about the Christmas specials that aired for many years.
Yeah, which I always loved.
Yes,
the Christmas specials.
Yeah, it's like it gets you in the mood for Christmas. And
for sure.
It's something I always look forward to as a kid, and that feeling kind of carries on today.
When you were a kid, they were, you had to catch it on TV or you were screwed. There was no streaming it somewhere, It was on Tuesday night at 7, and if you weren't there, you missed it.
Yeah, well, and even if you now as an adult, you see an ad that don't miss annual screening of a Charlie Brown Christmas on CBS, like,
I got to get in on that.
I may not watch it, but yeah,
cool.
You just get that instinctive excitement that comes with it. So, so talking about these specials, I think today we're going to discuss Frosty the Snowman, which you and I just watched together.
We did.
Yeah, it was fun. And so we can kind of go back and get like our knee-jerk reactions and kind of share that now.
Right, it's fresh in our brain. It's a little more fun this way, too, when we're not watching a whole series. We just had that 20-minute thing to watch, and now we're in.
Yeah, Rankin and Bass Productions put out Frosty the Snowman, and actually this followed 1964. Rankin and Bass had a hit on their hands with their stop-motion special. I'm stumbling tonight. Mm-hmm. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, which was based on that novelty song from earlier. It was a surprise hit, and they decided, well, we should do more of these.
Yeah.
So in 1967, they created The Cricket and the Hearth, and then 1968, The Mouse and the Mayflower. Neither of them really made much of an impact.
Yeah, forgettable. I don't even really remember those two. I question whether I even saw them.
Yeah, and knowing some of the quality on those, it probably weren't that great.
Sure.
But in 1969, they would find another secular Christmas song, like a novelty song that they would pull from. In this case, they go to the Steve Nelson and Walter E. Rollins 1950 novelty song that Jimmy Durante made famous with its debut, and go with Frosty the Snowman. As with Rudolph, they wanted to create an origin story for this character that basically existed in a 2.5-minute song.
Sure.
And they also wanted this one to look like a Christmas card, so they abandoned their stop motion animation and just went traditional style animation, and that also freed up some time for them to do a stop motion special at the same time of The Little Drummer Boy, which also debuted in 1969.
Not nearly as popular.
No, and that's one I've never liked as a kid.
Yeah.
You'd see that one come on, and that was always a disappointment. You'd see like the special, like the CBS special, and then The Little Drummer Boy,
not as entertaining.
It was a bit of a struggle, but Frosty the Snowman was actually entertaining and was one that you look forward to.
Yeah, and popular.
Frosty the Snowman debuted on Sunday, December 7th, 1969, and it would prove to be the follow-up hit that they were looking for. So much so that suddenly more of these specials would then quickly follow. You have Santa Claus is Coming to Town.
Sure.
And The Year Without a Santa Claus. Everybody, these ones that have become traditional.
And The Year Without Santa Claus, was that the one with Snow Miser and Mr. Freeze?
Heat Miser and Snow Miser, yes.
Yeah. That one kind of freaked me out when I was a kid. It was kind of scary.
It was, but it was such an original story. I mean, talk about memorable characters.
Right.
Everybody remembers those too.
Well, I didn't get the name right, but...
Well, but you remember the characters.
I remember the character for sure. I could draw a picture of him right now.
You may not remember the story itself that they were in, but you definitely remember those characters.
Yeah.
And they existed nowhere else.
Right. So. Yeah, it was cool. And I want to go back to, this, you mentioned this cartoon is based on the song, which growing up, I had it the other way. Mm-hmm. I had it, this is the song from that cartoon.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But just like you mentioned Rudolph, it's the same thing. The song is what inspired the animation or the cartoon.
Right.
Which is kind of cool. I mean, when you think about it, it's like, wow, normally you hear songs now, that's the theme song to whatever. That's a song from Scooby-Doo. Mm-hmm. But this is the cartoon from that song. So it kind of flips that around.
Yeah, and the fact that they actually had to create an origin for this
wildly popular song.
These characters that exist. It's pretty impressive in what they were able to come up with.
Yeah, here's a 2.5-minute song. Make a 20-minute story out of this song. That had to be hard.
Yeah. So, yeah, they would actually stick around with a couple of Rankin and Bass sequels to Frosty the Snowman. They would do another animated special in 1976 called Frosty's Winter Wonderland. In that one, they introduced the character Crystal, who provided a wife for Frosty. And Jack Frost was the antagonist in that one. Jimmy Durante, who the original singer, he actually would be the voice of the narrator in the original. He actually retired in 1972. He had a stroke and retired from professional
doing that.
Yeah, professional life or like public life, and he retreated. And so Andy Griffith actually was brought in to replace him as the narrator.
Oh, really?
Is what's interesting is it has nothing to do with Christmas at all. It avoids the mention of Christmas.
It's just a winter snowman
story. It's more like winter going into spring.
Yeah, because in Frosty, Santa Claus plays a part.
Yes.
So it's definitely Christmas.
Yeah, there's definitely a Christmas undertone in that one. There is no Christmas in this one. They would actually go back to Frosty one more time, and they would combine Rudolph and Frosty for Rudolph and Frosty's Christmas in July in 1979. Because Rudolph was always shown in the stop motion, they went to stop motion. It's the first time you see, and the only time I believe you see Frosty in stop motion. It's actually Jackie Vernon, who's the voice of Frosty. It's his last turn on the mic for Frosty. And it brings back Jack Frost for reasons I don't know. So again,
someone had a reason.
I mean, again, this has a Christmas theme to it, but it's set on July 4th. Plot doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, it was a thing.
Kids will watch it.
Yeah,
we'll put Rudolph and Frosty together and they'll love it.
It's a holiday special. And you'll watch it and you'll like it.
And buy more toys.
And then you would see a couple other non-Rankin and Bass specials with Frosty, and they really don't stack up.
They don't, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, really nothing stacks up to the original.
Sure. And they really hit gold with the first one, the original Frosty. The story was good, but the cast they put together, I mean, these are great voice actors. Mm-hmm. I mean, you mentioned Jimmy Durante, comedian, composer, actor, singer, songwriter. He wrote and sang Inka Dinka Doo. He was really into vaudeville, a lot of vaudeville productions, a lot of television credits. Also had a great career on Broadway. Was in Showgirl, The New Yorkers, Strike Me Pink, Jumbo, Stars in Your Eyes. And he was famous for saying, "Everybody wants to get into the act," and ha-cha-cha-cha was him with the big schnoz nose. That was his nickname, the schnoz, as the narrator. And then Jackie Vernon as Frosty. He was discovered in comedy clubs by Steve Allen. He was just a rotund stand-up comedian. He was famous for saying he used to be an atheist, but he gave it up because there were no holidays. And a couple of cool other people in here, like a real small cast, really only 5 people worth mentioning in this. A couple of them did extra voices, like the voices of the children and thing. And there was a teacher, but I'm not sure who did the teacher voice. I'm assuming it was one of the females that they already had. But Santa Claus was voiced by Paul Frees. Paul Frees was one of the radio reporters in H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. He was the voice of Knight Industries 2000, otherwise known as KITT, the car from Knight Rider.
It's crazy. I never would have known that.
Yeah, he performed with David Hasselhoff. How would we tie Frosty the Snowman to David Hasselhoff? And I just did it.
The aptly named Paul Frees, too.
The aptly named. He was also, and I know you love this because I know this is your favorite attraction at Disney World, or one of your favorites. He was the ghost host or the narrator on the Haunted Mansion attraction. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's so fun. Welcome, foolish mortals, to the Haunted Mansion. That's probably a terrible impersonation, but that's how I hear it. He's also the voice on Adventure Through Inner Space, which is now Star Tours at Disney World and Disneyland. So you can still hear his voice in use today when you go to Disney. Professor Hinkle, the magician, played by Billy D. Wolfe, vaudevillian actor. He performed with some of the greats, Phyllis Diller, Dick Van Dyke, Bob Hope, Debbie Reynolds, and was really good friends with Doris Day. So this is like the golden age of Hollywood, and he's with all these people. And then Karen. So Karen's the little girl who builds the snowman and befriends Frosty. She had an extensive career. Began doing voice work at the age of 12. In her 20s, she was doing all the animal voices on Magical World of Disney on television. In the 50s, her star in animation not only began to rise, but soared when Walt Disney sought her out and hired her to do the voice of Lucifer the Cat in Cinderella. Warner Brothers then hired her away to replace Bay Benaderet from Flintstones. And she also did all the Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies cartoons. Her most famous voice was Granny in the Tweety and Sylvester show. Unfortunately, Mel Blanc's contract called for an exclusive voice credit on those cartoons, so she didn't get any credit for being Granny. But my favorite thing about her, two things that are really cool. My favorite is that she was the voice of Rocky the Flying Squirrel in the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, and also Natasha Fatale, the arch nemesis of Rocky and Bullwinkle. And then she was the voice of the Chatty Cathy doll, which that's iconic.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Chatty Cathy doll's in the Toy Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So she was the voice of Chatty Cathy doll. And she also became, remember I mentioned she had a very long career, started at the age of 12. In 2008, she became the oldest person to win an Emmy at age 94 for her work on Garfield. So she had an incredibly long career, 82 years of voice acting is incredible. I mean, most actors don't live that long.
Yeah, absolutely. and we've had the luck to run across her earlier when we watched the Flintstones as Betty Rubble.
Yeah, Betty Rubble in the Flintstones.
The series, so yeah, and what's interesting between her and Paul Frees. So Paul Frees, you mentioned they covered multiple voices. Paul Frees was also the traffic cop, and then he and June Foray both originally provided the voices of the other children, not just Karen, but like so all the background, like all
the other little friend children. Sure.
Yeah, so all the kids kind of talking, like they were the voices. Eventually, within a couple of years, they would record actual children saying these lines.
Sure.
But initially, it was June Foray and Paul Frees
Yeah.
having that little added responsibility of
So they really did this with 5 voice actors: Jackie Vernon, Billy DeWolf, Jimmy Durante, Paul Frees, and June Foray. That was it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good cast to pull from.
Super good.
If you're going slight,
let's get 5 super good actors, and we'll spend all our money on just these 5 people. But it worked. I mean,
absolutely
the voice acting is super cool in this.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was your impression kind of coming back and now watching it again as an adult? Obviously, this is one that you see every year, so it's not like I haven't seen this since I was 5 years old. But,
sure.
But what as you watch it, what went through your head?
Yeah, I see it every year, and I remember as a kid, and I mentioned this when we did Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, that I remember waiting for this to come on TV as a kid. You'd hear about it a week or two in advance, and you plan the rest of the school year around it. And you're like, oh my God, it's on tonight. We're going to watch it tonight. It'd come on, and it was an epic. It was like if I remember this being my whole night is watching Frosty the Snowman. And then you and I just watched it, and it's 20 minutes.
It's so short.
I know. And even with commercials, it's like 30.
Yeah.
So I'm just like how fast the plot moves along now for me. But when I was a kid, I mean, she was lost in that forest for hours.
That's why she was so cold.
I mean, you were worried about her because she's been in the forest all night long. And in actuality, 60 seconds.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more.
Yeah, it's not overly long. It's interesting. So it's one of those I always look forward to, and I still kind of like, I'm watching
it's a great story.
Yeah, I mean, it hits different as an adult just because it's like, it's clearly, I'm not the target audience on this anymore. But I mean, it is definitely still entertaining, and it all starts with these kids, and which is interesting. So we talked about this while we were watching it. Is the timeline's a little wonky on this one because you have it's Christmas Eve, and they're in school,
right?
Like the day, it's at the afternoon, and they have this magician come in. Professor Hinkle comes in to perform magic.
Well, and that's what always happens. Towards the end of the semester, the teacher's bringing in somebody. Like
the teacher's done with it too.
I'm done teaching. Let's just we can't do a field trip because it's December. I'll bring in somebody to entertain the kids.
Like, you go do something. I'm gonna go sit over here and just like watch the clock burn. So he's a magician comes in, and he's a terrible magician.
Well, I think they even introduce him as he was the world's worst magician.
Yes,
or the narrator says he's the world's worst magician.
and he does, and he stumbles with his act, and he's terrible. And so it's Christmas Eve. And school ends basically just like
midday,
mid-performance.
Right.
Yeah, the bell rings, and the kids trample him on their way out.
Yes.
And go running out, and it's Christmas Eve. You think, kids are running home to go get. No, they go and hang out in the snow, and they play in the snow and build a snowman.
Yeah.
In clothes that you would not deem as winter clothing.
Not dressed for the weather. No. Not at all. Well, some of them kinda.
No. Well, I mean,
some of
they
them
have elements.
Right. One of them had earmuffs and a scarf, but no gloves.
Yes, Karen's wearing earmuffs, a scarf, mittens, boots, and a coat, but no pants.
Right. No, just bare-legged. I mean, you didn't have any little girl tights on or something.
Like,
Just
how
nothing.
do you let her out of the house? But then the rest of the kids are in various states of undress for winter.
There's
winter
one
weather.
girl wearing like a strappy shoe, like a dress shoe.
Well, that's the girl. She's wearing a pink jumper and a white shirt underneath with the sleeves are rolled up.
Right.
And she's the pink shoes, and she's running like not a hint of winter clothing on her.
None. Yeah.
And every single kid, nobody's wearing pants.
No.
They're all wearing maybe knickers or shorts. But
right.
Yeah, they're all running around.
And they all have huge feet.
Yeah.
Giant ski boot looking feet.
Yeah, like you can see leg on every single one of them. It's scandalous.
Yes.
But
no knees.
You can see that kid's ankles.
Yeah.
So they go out and build the snowman, and while they're building it, Professor Hinkle has a meltdown, and he takes his hat and he throws it in the garbage.
Yeah.
And Hocus Pocus, his rabbit, who lives in the hat apparently, just starts hopping away, and Professor Hinkle then chases after him. He's like, "Wait, give me back my hat."
Yeah.
And this is a point of contention.
Right. Because when does possession of the hat change?
Yes.
Because the rabbit brings the hat over, and the kids take it and put it on the snowman, and abracadabra, Frosty comes to life and says, "Happy birthday."
Yes.
So then Jimmy Durante, the narrator, makes it clear that the magician had thrown away the hat, and now the children have the hat, and they've given it to Frosty, which gave Frosty life. I want to be very clear about that.
He's like,
That's what he basically, isn't that what he says?
Yeah,
we want to be clear about that.
Yeah, let's be clear about this. Professor Hinkle no longer owned it. It belonged to the kids.
Right. Otherwise, in reality, you should be rooting for the magician to get his hat back. Yeah. But you can't have that. We need you to be rooting for the little kids who took his hat.
Yeah. I mean, the rabbit kind of he's a mixer. He's a troublemaker. He goes running away, and the kids just take the hat.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, you got rid of it." And like, how do you know he got rid of it? All you know is that the rabbit came running over and brought it over to you.
He's got a rogue rabbit. He didn't throw away the hat.
So, of course, the hat brings Frosty to life. Mr. Hinkle sees it, and he's like, wait a second.
There is some magic in that hat.
This is actually a magical hat. I will take that. Thank you. And I will become a millionaire magician.
Well, the lyric in the song says there must have been some magic in that old silk hat they found.
They didn't find that.
But they didn't find it. It was given to them.
Yes. And
maybe there was a labor dispute. Maybe the rabbit was holding out for something.
Well, and I love the fact that they introduce this magician. Mr. Hinkle is a terrible magician. He's one of the world's worst magician.
Yeah.
And he already has possession of this magic hat. And it's not done anything for him.
No, he's still bad.
So now why does he wants it again? Like, well, maybe the fact that if you're a practicing magician, you're bad with a magic hat, maybe, just maybe, your calling lies along another career path. Because magic is not your bag.
It's not working for you. No. Yeah. Should try something else.
So I've tried magic and I'm terrible. They put it on a pile of snow and it works.
Right.
Clearly, this is not for me.
The kids know how to use the hat on accident.
So does a snowman.
And the rabbit. Yeah. The snowman figured it out. He could even count. Well, to 5. He went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9,
6. Yeah. 6. He's like, well, I could at least count to 5.
Which is amazing because he didn't have fingers.
No.
He didn't have that many fingers. So.
No. Well, and then he can juggle, and I love that he's like, I can juggle, and they see him like firing off these snowballs. He didn't make them. There's one of those kids. The half-dressed kid is like there's all these pre-made snowballs, and he's just
chucking them at him.
Like, where did those come from?
Yeah.
But yeah, so after their conflict with Mr. Hinkle, they take off and they go
marching through town with the snowman.
Yep, and Frosty starts getting a little sweaty. He's afraid that the temperature is going to start rising, even though it's getting cold. It's getting later in the day.
Yep, but it's
still
too much
snowing.
Red on the thermometer.
Yeah, and
I think he was just sweating to the oldies. I think there was just too much exercise for the fat snowman.
They just made him too heavy.
Yeah, he was perspiring. He wasn't melting.
So they decide that, of course, in order to save Frosty, they have to get him up to the North Pole.
I think it doesn't Frosty recommend that. Like, well, the only place I won't melt is the North Pole, which the South Pole would work too, or northern Wisconsin.
Yeah, well, this time of year, just setting up into Canada is probably okay.
Anywhere, yeah.
Yeah, you can go farther north.
But it's more fun to say the North Pole, because Santa's going to be involved then if you're going to the North Pole.
Yeah,
so they decide to take him to the train station, right, to get him a ticket on the train to the North Pole, because that's what you do. So they go to the train station and ask for a ticket to the North Pole, and the train conductor or the ticket master is really kind of funny. He's hilarious. He's doing all these calculations about how to get this guy to the North Pole, and he comes back to the window asking for $3,000. And the kid's like, we don't have any money. While we were watching it, I looked up the currency time machine app. You can find out how much would $3,000 buy in the 1960s as opposed to today. And in today's money, that's $25,000. Like, is he buying the train? There's no train ticket on Earth that's $25,000.
Stock in the train company.
Exactly. Yeah, he bought the whole B&O Railroad. You throw in St. James Place, and I'll give you the B&O Railroad for $25,000.
Well, and it kind of makes sense when you realize that, of course, we don't know where they're originating, where they're starting. But he even says they go through Alberta to the Hudson Bay to Nome, Alaska, and then to the North Pole. So it's a very circuitous, basically, like, here's a tour of Canada into Alaska.
We're taking you north of the border all the way across to Alaska. You're going to have to go through customs twice, into Canada and out of Canada.
And then somehow eventually from Alaska, the train will float and get you up to the North Pole. So he clearly rigged the ticket so that he's getting as most money he can, and of course they can't buy it, so they instead do what you would encourage any kid to do, is hop a train, and without paying for it.
Well, Karen starts climbing into the refrigerator car, and Frosty says, "You're coming too?" "Well, yeah, but I'll just need to be home for dinner." So it goes back to
won't mind.
Yeah, it goes back to your timeline things. Like, what is going on here? This is worse than the Flintstones.
Yeah, and this is Christmas Eve. She's not thinking, I got to get home.
It's Christmas Eve. Coming. Yeah, we got dinner plans, or we're going to Mass, or something's going on. It's Christmas Eve. I'm going to hang out with the snowman. As long as I'm home for dinner, it'll be fine.
In a freezer car.
Yeah, with the rabbit. Yeah. So it's the rabbit and the snowman and Karen heading to the North Pole.
And Mr. Hinkle somehow catching up to them, and then hanging on to the bottom of the train as it pulls away. Of course, the story point is that Karen's freezing. She's in there. Yeah, this kid with no pants on is sitting in a freezer car.
Cold.
And, just shivering uncontrollably. Nobody's worried about Mr. Hinkle, who is on the outside of the train, clutching onto frozen metal, being dragged along on the tracks.
But at least he's wearing pants.
That is true. And he even had gloves on.
Yeah, he was missing his hat.
Yeah.
But he had gloves on.
He was a terrible magician, but he was dressed for the weather.
He was dressed well, yeah. Yeah, so they decide to get off the train, because the train stops, and Frosty's worried about Karen being cold because she's sneezing. Well, you wouldn't be sneezing if you weren't cold, right? So that's his snowman logic.
Yeah, I learned something.
Yeah.
If somebody sneezes, it's because they're cold.
Yeah, don't say God bless you, give him a jacket. So they get off the train, because he's looking to get Karen warmed up. Hinkle doesn't know, and he takes off on the train. He's like, "You tricked me." And they start walking through the woods. He's like, "I got to find someplace warm for Karen," which is cool. He's concerned about his friend Karen. They get into the forest, and he's got the rabbit with him. He's carrying Karen because Karen's nearly comatose with hypothermia. And they come up on these woodland creatures, and Frosty asks Hocus Pocus the rabbit, "Go talk to the animals and see if they'll build a fire for us," because he can't make fire. He can't be near fire. He can't even say the word or request fire, apparently.
Yes.
It's either that or the rabbit speaks animal, which is what I thought. Like, okay, well, the rabbit can speak to animals because he's an animal too. But he goes over there and he pantomimes what he wants. I'm like, well, Frosty could have pantomimed that. Yeah. Why did the rabbit need to pantomime's universal language, right?
Yeah, he's just going big, broad gestures. It kind of looks like he's having a stroke.
Yeah.
And all Frosty has to do is like, "Hey, can you animals build a fire?"
Sure.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, they build a massive fire, and Karen hangs out, and she's all fun.
And she's good.
And everybody leaves her alone because... You don't want to be animals don't want to be warm either.
Right. Yeah.
But
well, they're probably worried that Smokey Bear is going to come after them. Like, "You animals started a fire?"
We're still trying to get our Christmas decorations up, and we're trying to build a fire for this kid who doesn't have pants on in the middle of the north.
Yeah, I felt sorry for her, and we had to do it.
So they're hanging out, and eventually Professor Hinkle shows up again. Now, we do see him leave the train.
Yeah.
As he decides to jump for it.
Yep.
Actually doesn't break any bones of his body. He clearly got a concussion, though.
Obviously.
I mean, he went headfirst into a tree.
Right.
and then they show him, like, knocked out.
Right.
And
comes to.
And then Jimmy Durante even says, like, well, they had to get going before Professor Hinkle woke up.
Right. They left him for dead. Head into the woods.
But he does find them, of course,
right.
because...
Well, he's probably following the huge fire. I mean, what is the line in Dances with Wolves? Only a white man would make a fire that big for people to see. Only a big white snowman would make a fire that big for people to see.
Well, it's animals. Well,
yeah, what are you going to do?
What can you do?
They have no sense of scale.
So he catches up to him, and Frosty then scoops up Karen, throws her on his back, and then he goes belly whopping, basically up and down hills off into the horizon,
right,
and gets away. And so they just kind of slide to a stop in front of a random greenhouse.
A greenhouse growing poinsettias.
Yes.
Yeah, the tropical Christmas plant.
Yes.
How apropos. So he carries Karen in there instead of just opening the door and putting her in there. The snowman goes into the greenhouse, and we all know what's going to happen. He's going to start to melt, but he says, no, it's okay. I've been meaning to shed a few pounds anyways.
those 12 hours you've been alive, you've really been packing it on.
And they didn't stop to eat. He's just... he started a little rotund, honestly.
Yeah, so it's really the kid's fault. They made him a little heavy, and I mean, he's clearly never comfortable in his own skin.
Sure.
he's not at the weight he wants to be, but
right.
Of course, driving in a frozen boxcar full of
put on
Christmas cakes.
Yeah,
probably didn't help either.
He put on some weight on that trip. It's like going on a cruise and expecting to lose weight. You go, I'm going to do a lot of walking.
Well, I guess you could see with a snowman who goes belly whopping, he's just sliding on his body through the snow. He's probably actually packing it on as opposed to like sliding through. But of course, what you would think would be a huge head start ahead of Professor Hinkle is pretty negligible because they no more than get in there, and Hinkle shows up and locks them in.
Yeah, slams the door, murders the snowman,
and says, "Just wait for you to die, and then we'll come and claim the hat off your corpse."
He's like a Bond villain, but he stayed there to watch. Yeah. Bond villain would leave. He stayed there to watch Frosty melt, and this little girl just in despair.
Yeah, watch this traumatized this little kid who drops her knees and crying. Yeah, Frosty melts, so he's a puddle. She's crying over the puddle. There's a hat sitting there, and he could have gone in and got it. Instead, he just sat there and just let her suffer.
Let her wallow in her.
Your torment is delicious. It feeds me.
Which at that point, he's a good villain.
Yeah. Yeah, they could have really played him up then at that point, like before that, he maniacally and like tenting his fingers.
He was like, I'll give you points for saying tenting his fingers. Yeah, I think he was a bumbling fool before that, but at that point, he became the villain.
Oh, yeah.
He went really bad.
Yeah.
He was all in.
He goes evil.
He's like, I've been chasing you through the forest all night long. I jumped on the bottom of a train.
I'm not going to remember any of this in the morning because I'm just like concussed like 5 ways from Sunday.
I need that hat.
Yeah.
So his plan gets
I don't really even know why anymore. I just need that hat.
Something tells me it's just for the principle of it. He's getting beat by a make-believe snowman and a little girl. So then Santa arrives. Mm-hmm. By chance, Santa shows up and saves the day. Opens the door, goes and talks to Karen and explains, well, he's made of Christmas snow, and as soon as the cold December air hits him, he'll be back good as new. So he kicks the door open, and Frosty comes to life again, and happy birthday! Yeah. And Frosty's back, but Hinkle still wants his hat. And he's demanding, and he threatens Santa Claus, which you never do.
Yeah, Santa's having none of it.
You don't threaten Santa Claus. Santa's like calm as a cucumber. He's like, no, let me tell you how this is going to go. Says, you give that hat to that snowman or you are never getting another Christmas present. And Hinkle's like, no more magic cards, no more magic dice, nothing. Nope, not a thing. And he submits, okay, you can keep the hat. And then he gives him a penance. Santa tells him to go home and write an apology to Frosty the Snowman 100 zillion times by morning.
And he's like, okay.
And off he goes running into town, which didn't look that far away. I mean, they had been on a train
suddenly.
through the forest, and all of a sudden you can see town right over there.
Yeah, it's all a big circular little trip here.
So then Santa talks to Karen and explains, Frosty can live at the North Pole with me, and he'll come back every year to play. And it's a happy ending, and everybody's happy. It's a cool story.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, and the best part about all of it is that they all climb into Santa's sleigh. Santa flies Karen back home. They drop her off on the roof, and they take off. Yes. And she's standing on the roof of this 2-story house, waving as if they'd go off into the distance.
A snow-covered roof.
Thinking, I've got frostbites. Yeah. I can't feel my extremities. How do I get down?
I'm hypothermic. I've been traumatized, and now I'm stuck on the roof. And Santa's like, good luck with that.
I got packages to deliver.
Yeah. And out of all that,
snowman to deal with on top of it.
Santa's traveling light, too, because he's only got 4 reindeer. Yeah. Not 8.
And there's nothing else in his
Nothing
sled.
in his sled, yeah. This is like his casual sled. This is his daily driver. This is...
It's like a scouting trip before he goes out later in the night.
Later that night, yeah. What do you think of Frosty the Snowman? I know we don't rate our specials, but,
right.
where would you put it in relation to all the other Christmas specials?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those must-sees every year. It's one of those, I mean, you're not going to watch it over and over on a loop, but watching it once a year, it's kind of one of those must-sees.
I agree. This one's a gamer. I mean, this is one of the top-tier Christmas specials that you have to see. And there's a lot of them, but this is the one that you've got to watch this.
Yeah, I mean, it's really efficient storytelling. And like you said, when you're a kid, it feels like, wow, this is going on forever.
It's an epic.
It snaps. It goes really quickly through it. I do love the presentation of Santa Claus. A good presentation of Santa Claus is kind of surprisingly hard to find.
It's hard, yeah.
I think nails everything about him. The heart, and he's just calm, and he's like in control of the situation. He's not like like mean or rude. He's just kind of like, all right. And I mean, even with Mr. Hinkle, who's clearly as a self-proclaimed self-proclaimed evil magician at this point, and he's like, no, hang on. It's like kind of like
was very patient with him. Treated him like a lost child.
Yes. So everything about it kind of hits the right way, and of course, nostalgia-wise, it's you can't go wrong with it.
Yeah, I loved it, and I really enjoyed. I'm always partial to the voice acting, and this was a great cast. Mm-hmm. I mean, these people were really good. I mean, some of them were well-established actors before this,
right?
And then what they did after this too. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was really cool. Yeah, they nailed it.
Yeah, definitely a must-see every Christmas.
Yeah, and fun, and I look forward to seeing it every year.
Absolutely.
Well, I hear, Mom, I think it's time for us to go outside, so that means cartoon time is over. I'm John.
I'm Robert.
And this is Toon Talk.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you want more Toon Talk, you can find us on Twitter at Toon Talk Guys.
Or if you've got questions, comments, or suggestions, you can email us at toontalkguys@gmail.com.